Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back another video today. And today, the Miami Heat beat the Atlanta Hawks 123-114. Great win for the Miami Heat to head to the playoffs to face the Cleveland Cavaliers. And they're into the playoffs. And historic for the Miami Heat, they become the first team in the NBA play-in era, which has been around since 2019-20 season. I would say really the 2020-21 season. The 2019-20 season, they did have one play-in game, and it was Memphis and Portland, but it wasn't a two-conference thing. It was something that they did if a certain team, if like the 9 seed was like 3 or 3.5 games back from the 8 seed, and if they weren't, there was not going to be a play-in game. And in the Eastern Conference, there was too big of a separation for them to do the game. But then the next year in the 2020-21 season, they started it where the top 10 seeds do the play-in, and it doesn't matter how far back you are. It doesn't matter if you're 10 games back from if you're the 10 seed and you're 10 games back from the 9 seed. Which that's not going to happen. But if you are, it doesn't matter, and that's how it was when it started in the 2019-20 season. So we've seen the full play-in like you've seen this week since the 2020-21 season, and the Miami Heat are the first 10 seed to get into the playoffs. And that's interesting. The Mavs tried to become the second tonight, but they were. Unfortunately, well, it depends. I don't think Memphis fans would say unfortunately, but they were not able to get the win and head to the playoffs. Which, geez, I feel bad for Mavs fans. But the Heat are that first team in NBA history to be a 10 seed into the playoffs from the play-in, and we'll see how many more can do it. It so far it's been something that's been rare, but. Look, I think this Miami Heat team, they're more talented to 10 seed to me. Just honestly, I think you look at all the teams in the Eastern Conference that were participating in the Eastern Conference play-in. I think they're better than I'd say better than pretty much all the teams that were in the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference. I would say maybe not the Magic, but the Hawks and Bulls. I think Miami's better and wanted to beat them. I don't know. Orlando, that's a close call between the two, but Miami's not a 10 seed talent, right? I mean, they're better than that, and that's why they were able to be the first 10 seed to get in as the 8 seed. It's really impressive for them. But this was an overtime game. At first, I was thinking this was the first play-in tournament overtime game, which would have been crazy because that would be 2 record-breaking things for this Miami Heat team in the same game. But no, there was that game a couple years ago for the Warriors and the Grizzlies where they had an overtime game in the play-in tournament. And so it's not the first, but it's I believe it is the second. So yeah, but it's the first overtime. It's the first overtime play-in game for Eastern Conference teams, because the first was Western with the Grizzlies and the Warriors. Not recently, not the matchup we saw a couple years ago, but a matchup we saw in the 2020-21 season. But let's go over some stats. Tyler Herro was fantastic in this game. Great overtime period for him. 30 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. Bam Adebayo was great. 17-11, 5 assists, 2 steals, 5 blocks for Bam. 20 points for Wiggins, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. Great all-around game for Wiggins, 8 for 17. Khalil Ware, 12 points, 5 points for Alec Burks, 6 points for Duncan Robinson, 12 points for Haywood Highsmith with 10 rebounds, 16 points for Davion Mitchell, DNPs for, Jovic, it says DNP, but he is, he's injured. And Terry Rozier getting DNP'd. Now, it says Peel Larson DNP as well, but he's also injured, but there is no excuses for Terry Rozier or Jaime Jaquez. They are both healthy and good to go, but still not playing, which is interesting. Davion Mitchell's played that well to the point where he's getting 40 minutes and he's playing over guys like Terry Rozier and Jaquez. That's interesting. And he played well, though. He had 16 points, 5 assists, 5 for 13, 4 for 9. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami changes that up. That they don't change that up in the offseason, during their playoff series against the Cavs and continue to roll with Davion Mitchell getting heavy minutes off the bench. And I don't blame them for that. He's played great. But, yeah. So the thing I will say is that, I think that this Miami team is more talented than, right now they're more talented than they were last postseason. Because, yes, you look at it, Miami had Jimmy Butler on their roster last year in the postseason in their series against the Boston Celtics. But those who remember, Jimmy Butler did not play in that 5-game series against the Boston Celtics. Miami took Boston to 5 games last year, and they didn't even have Jimmy Butler play 1 second. Jimmy, in the play-in game, got hurt against the Philadelphia 76ers and was ruled out in a play-in game against the Chicago Bulls. They didn't have Jimmy against the Chicago Bulls last year, beat the Bulls even though they didn't have Jimmy, and then they played Boston, no Jimmy. Honestly, if Miami had Jimmy last year, playoff Jimmy too, with the team they had that took Boston to 5, I don't think Miami takes Boston down because Boston was that good last year, but Miami might have taken Boston to 6 or 7 games if Butler would have been healthy, and that's something no one did last year. Boston played 4 teams last year, Miami, Indiana, Cleveland, and Dallas, and no one took them to 6 or 7 games, and I think Miami would have done that if they had Butler. So you have Andrew Wiggins now. Andrew Wiggins is 10 times better than Jimmy Butler sitting on the bench because he's injured. It's nothing against Jimmy, I'm just saying. You have Wiggins in there instead of injured Jimmy. Khalil Ware is in there. You didn't have him last year. Davion Mitchell, with the way he's playing, is a guy they didn't have last season. Terry Rozier is someone who was pretty solid for them in that Boston series. He's not playing because he's just out of the rotation. Jaime Jaquez is someone who played well for them in that series, and he's not in the rotation. Here's the other thing I will say is Nikola Jovic was someone who played well for them in that series. He's been injured, so maybe you want to get him back in this series at some time. And Caleb Martin was a guy who was starting for Miami in that playoff series against Boston and played well, and he's not on the team anymore. So there are guys that are no longer on the team in that Boston series, that were on that team last year, and then there are guys that are new, like Mitchell, Kyle Anderson, Burks, Ware, Wiggins. So, yeah, does Miami stand a chance against Cleveland? No. But I think Miami could play better basketball in the first round against Cleveland than they did against Boston last year, is my prediction. Miami could win 2 games against Cleveland, but most likely will lose in 5. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and peace out.